vote. Thanks to the work of people like Stacey Abrams and other organizers, Black voters in Georgia have turned out to vote in droves since 2020, despite legislation passed in the state designed to make it harder to do so. But the former president regards these Black votes the same way he regards our democracy: disposable. I'm joined now by Greg Bluestein, political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and MSNBC political contributor. Catherine Christian is also here, MSNBC legal analyst and former Manhattan assistant district attorney. Greg, I'm going to start with you. You have said that former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan could be a star witness in this case. What do you think DA Willis is hoping to hear from him?
Yeah, he's one of four witnesses, at least four witnesses we've confirmed who are supposed to go before the grand jury this week, Monday and Tuesday. And look, I think he gives a different perspective because he's a Republican. He's a conservative Republican, but he also broke openly with Donald Trump in 2020. He was among the Republican leaders who shouted down, who rebuffed the former president's attempts to reverse the election results here in Georgia. He also demoted 3 state senators who were part of the effort to convince or persuade the then Vice President Mike Pence to block Georgia's Electoral College votes as well. So I think he gives a different GOP perspective to those grand jurors to show that this is not just a partisan prosecution. This is something that Republicans and Democrats here in Georgia have spoken out against in terms of Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the election results.
Greg, when do you think we will see any indictments related to this investigation?
Right now, the earliest we could see it is Tuesday. That's the day that we've circled on the calendar because that's the day we know that the former lieutenant governor and another witness, independent journalist George Chidi, they're both set to testify before the grand jury, which is supposed to meet Monday and Tuesday.
So, Catherine, in this case, there's been lots of talk about the possibility of racketeering charges. Does the CNN reporting that the Fulton County prosecutors have these, text messages about Coffee County's voting system give you any more insight into that charge?
I think all of the evidence we've heard of, between Rudy Giuliani making false statements and showing a doctored video and making defamatory statements against the election workers, the U.S. Attorney of the Northern District of Georgia resigning, he either jumped or pushed, the phone call that we all know about that happened on January 2nd, 2021 was not Donald Trump's only phone call. He called the AG before then to pressure the AG into, joining an election fraud lawsuit, a frivolous one. He called the governor. So I think all of that evidence gives me, I hate to predict. I think there probably will be a RICO, a Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act charge, which is very different than the federal charge. People are familiar with the federal charge. Georgia has its own version, and this DA is an expert in charging that because she's done it in the past. She's done it against school administrators. She's done it in gang cases. There's a pending case now on trial where she's charged. So this is her expertise.
And what is the key difference between federal racketeering RICO charges and Georgia? What is the biggest ramification, if you will?
The Georgia one is much more expansive. So if we see RICO, it means that the DA Willis she believes that she has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendants in this case, and there probably will be multiple defendants, engaged in a common plan or scheme to overturn the legitimate results of the Georgia presidential election. So the difference between Georgia and the federal is there doesn't have to be an enterprise. And there are also many more crimes that the person can commit can be considered part of it. So just in a nutshell, she has to prove that there was racketeering activity. And what does that mean under Georgia? That means that the defendants either attempt to commit, or solicit someone to commit a crime that is chargeable by indictment under Georgia law. And those crimes under Georgia law includes making false statements, perjury, forgery, bribery, violating the Georgia Computer Act. She also has to prove there was a pattern of that racketeering activity, which means she has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that at least 2 acts, and they're called predicate acts, were committed. And it was committed for the purpose of engaging in this common plan or scheme to overturn the Georgia results.
See, I knew Catherine Christian could give us the details. So, Greg, we're talking about Coffee County right now. We know that Sidney Powell is the person in Trump's orbit, his lawyer, that hired those folks, that data firm that went in and allegedly, that's when the breach happened that same day that they were in that building. We also know that Rudy Giuliani received a target letter from DA Fani Willis. Remind us, were there any other target letters that were sent out? Who else in Donald Trump's orbit could potentially be caught up in this grand jury situation this week?
Yeah, it's a pretty wide net, Simone. I mean, 18 or so folks have received, at least 18 people have received these target letters notifying them that they could be facing criminal charges. We know since then, though, at least 8 of those people that have received those target letters have struck immunity deals. That is the bulk of the fake electors in Georgia. So 8 of the fake electors in Georgia have struck immunity deals. So we don't expect them to face charges. But that also leaves a number of other people on the table. You mentioned Giuliani. You mentioned some of the people involved in this Coffee County scheme. There are others in Donald Trump's orbit. John Eastman, the former GOP chair of here in Georgia, David Schaefer, who is involved in the fake elector plot. Mark Meadows, folks who are intricately involved in the efforts in Georgia to undermine Joe Biden's victory. Those could all be part and parcel of this investigation.
Greg, if I may, I want to ask you a political question about Republicans in Georgia and how they are responding to the potential of this next indictment, at least the grand jury being convened this week. Donald Trump obviously has been fundraising off of his other indictments, and nationally they actually haven't impacted his poll numbers. But based on your reporting, what are leaders in Georgia saying? Because from what I gather, they seem to be split on this particular issue.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, Donald Trump still has a double-digit lead here in Georgia like he has in other states around the nation. But this hits home, right? We lived through the Brad Raffensperger call. We lived through those efforts. We watched firsthand those efforts here in Georgia to overturn the election results, the calls to Governor Kemp, the calls to Attorney General Chris Carr, the rest of it, in the middle of a runoff campaign to decide control of the U.S. Senate. So a lot of Republicans I'm talking to, some think it will strengthen Donald Trump's hands, but others are very, very openly worried about it. They say that the party better have a backup. GOP leaders either don't want to talk about it at all or are privately very, very concerned that Donald Trump's this is a must-win state for Republicans in November 2024, and they're very worried that Donald Trump's legal problems could doom him here in Georgia.